Fresh tensions in the Middle East are threatening higher oil prices, and with them, pressure on the government to respond, including granting President Marcos the power to suspend fuel excise taxes. So how far can the government go in providing relief without putting the country's public finances and economic recovery at risk? Our guest today is recognized as the Bankers Asia's best finance minister in 2008. He helped stabilize the Philippine economy before and during the global financial crisis, championing broadening of tax reforms. Well, with us now for his views, former Philippine Finance Secretary Gary Teves. It's good seeing you again, Sec Gary. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
All right,
I hope
so
I can assist you.
Yes, you can indeed. So what do you make of a blanket suspension of excise taxes on oil?
Well, before deciding on that, let's try to see if other measures can take place, because that will take a little more study. But I would suggest perhaps targeting the contingent and the confidential funds, not only of the president, but other agencies like the Department of Agriculture, Transportation, and also the unconditional cash transfers, like the aid for individuals for in crisis situation, and also the DSW. I think the sum total of this is roughly about 80 billion, Kathy. So why don't we start on that and then work on determining whether we should really suspend the collection of excise taxes.
So why not?
Or
what's your concern about the suspension on excise taxes?
Yeah, there's another variance, which is to decrease. No, so those things might take a little time. No,
how so, Secretary Gary? Why the concern? What do we need to do to make sure that we're doing the right thing before we suspend or give the president powers to suspend excise taxes?
Yes, of course, we need the support of not only the policymakers, both the executive and the department and Congress. I think LEDAC should really be activated more often, so that together we monitor the situation very well. And we need also to get the civil society to participate. We talk about, I think Juneri talked about earlier about the possibility of having some sacrifice in quality spending. This need not be the case if we are more rigorous really in the implementation of our 2026 budget with the assistance of civil society as well. No? So I think we need to help each other. It's not only going to be one department versus another.
If we take a look at the budget to GDP ratio, budget deficit to GDP ratio, there is a concern. It's at 5.6, and the debt to GDP ratio is over 63%.
Yes.
So if we do suspend the excise tax on oil, what impact could it have on these metrics?
Well, this will increase, no? Unless there is a corresponding reduction of expenditures on some other items, no? That's the only way, because you really look at it like a family budget, how much revenues will be reduced, and therefore, if you want to maintain the same percentage of the deficit as in relation to GDP, you've got to do something on the expenditure side, no?
And do something on the expenditure side at a time of a slowing economy. Are we able to find revenue sources to make up for the loss of a suspension in excise taxes?
It's not easy, because when the economy is slowed down, then there is a correlation in terms of the amount of taxes that you can collect during difficult times compared to times when we're moving faster. The economy is moving faster, no? Like a projection of 4 to 5%, you normally will have lower revenues compared to a 5 or 6%, no?
The direction right now appears to be studying the proposal to grant the president powers to suspend collection of excise taxes. If and when this happens, what sort of safeguards would you propose to make sure that it ends when it should?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about government money that's going to be impacted here, a big loss of at least 32 billion pesos, if indeed enacted.
Correct. I would suggest, because the proposal seems to be unclear as to how long the suspension will last or what kind of power the president will have. I'd like to see a limitation in terms of maybe X number of months, something similar to the previous train law, which is a 3-month period. So that would be helpful. So if we're back to normal again, I think we can revert back to the previous setup of collecting excise taxes again. But I said there are so many other options, but I'd like to see immediate action right now on the use of some of the funds that are available, the contingency fund, the confidential funds, and the unconditional cash transfers like the AISCS and the Ayuda program.
Worth 80 billion pesos,
More or
as
less, yeah.
you mentioned. But what about implementation? Because
Yes,
this
okay.
is where the problem arises, doesn't it? And
Okay.
which got us into the flood control corruption scandal.
Correct. Well, right now, my understanding is that the DSWD is already a good system, and then the Department of Transportation has a similar one. But I'd like to see really an accelerated implementation of the new AID system to really determine the persons who should really be the recipient of the subsidies. So again, the participation of the civil society will be helpful, that these agencies are really giving it to the right persons.
And you're willing to give it a shot, even
Yes.
though the people of the Philippines haven't yet gotten over the trust and governance issues
Yes.
that we faced even before
Well,
the
this is
Middle
a
East
good
conflict.
test. That is a good test on the willingness of the government to allow civil society to monitor, and the active participation of the members of civil society as well. Governance is still an important issue here. With limited funds, I think we should be more careful about the use of these limited funds.
Indeed, and with higher oil, it becomes a tougher issue. You did make a mention of Junetti. I did speak with him. He's the lead economist of BPI, and he told me that the Middle East conflict may have just roiled our economic recovery plans. Let's listen to him.
Okay.
With this scenario in the Middle East, growth could even be threatened further, because instead of the budget going to education and other agencies and government, some of them might have to go to fuel subsidies instead, Kathy. So again, the ability to improve the quality of government spending could be affected by this conflict.
So do you agree, Secretary Gary, that the government may have lost its ability for quality spending because of the Middle East conflict?
As I said earlier informally, I don't think we should give up, and I think now is the time for a greater challenge on the part of the government to really scrutinize the implementation of the budget. Secondly, I mentioned about the participation of other groups like the civil society. We should really be more rigorous in our monitoring of the funds that are available. And besides, we don't know whether this is going to be temporary or over a longer period, but we should start having that kind of discipline and rigorous monitoring.
But even before the Middle East conflict, you'd been so concerned about the corruption and governance issues still unaddressed, possibly slowing economic growth for the first half?
Yes.
Before a recovery can even be
Yes.
had in the second. Do you think that the Middle East conflict may push out the recovery timeline further?
It may it may delay the recovery, and therefore, to the extent that we don't go below 4%, hopefully, I think we can still attain 4% for the year, despite the Middle East crisis. And hopefully it will not be too long. No.
Is anything bad about being at 4%? I mean, compare us with the ASEAN neighbors at 4%. Is that not a good benchmark for possibly
there are
worst
countries
case
that are
scenario?
doing much better, like Vietnam, for example. But there are countries that have fallen below 4%. I'm not saying that our issues and problems right now are quite serious, that anywhere between 4 to 5%, and also now the Middle East conflict, will be somewhat tolerable. But of course, I'd always like to have more than 5%. But let's see what happens. This situation is so dynamic that we can review this as often as possible.
And pegged on your key concern, which is really trust and governance issues.
Yes.
So what you've repeated civil society many times in this conversation of ours. So what then do you think is the key role of civil society in helping government redeem itself from these governance issues at a time when higher oil is giving us less chance to make the most out of the budget we've been given?
Well, I think, for example, I mentioned about the need for Ladakh to meet more often. I think civil society should be allowed to observe what is being discussed, especially in the field of energy and the situation right now. I think they have to be comfortable that the government is really serious in addressing these problems, given the limited resources that we will have. So the private sector advisory council should really be more active, and some of the members of the civil society can also join this group, because this is supposed to be a group that should advise the president. And on the inflation situation, I think the Bangko Central can only do so much on the demand side. But on the supply side, it's the government who really have to be more serious in ensuring that they undertake the responsibility very well, especially on the supply chain. So the budget of the different agencies like agriculture, transportation, and others should really be spent wisely.
All hands on deck. It's
Hands on,
make or break. Thank you so much
Thank you,
for your insights. Really appreciate it. Former Finance Secretary Gary Teves.